Hi guys, welcome back. Today we're going to cover Chapter 12, Types of Business Presentations. And in this lecture, we are going to pull out 4 main ideas that we're going to discuss. So knowing that you still need to read the chapter holistically, but these are the 4 things that we're really going to focus on in this Chapter 12 lecture. So first of all, we're going to review some persuasive organizational patterns for these specific presentations. Then we'll cover some more details on sales presentations, as we will be doing one of those in this class. Then we'll cover training, and lastly, group presentations. So first of all, we'll start with a bit of a review here regarding persuasive organization, and we'll talk about these 5 patterns. Again, a review from Chapter 9, but just to make sure we have these things in our brains as we work into these different types of business presentations we may encounter in the workplace. So the first one we'll chat about here is problem solution. So this organizational pattern is simple in nature, but also very detailed within the support, the subpoints of this organizational pattern. So simple in nature because there's only 2 main points. The first is the problem, and the second is the solution. So everything discussed in the problem should be directly solved in the solution, and you are persuading your audience to adopt those solutions and solve the problem. So the example here that we used in Chapter 9 is the government wastes tax money. That is the problem. So you would flesh out that problem in the subpoints. And then going into that solution, vote for me and I will offer all of these solutions that solve those various problems. And we know here that problem solution is a great choice for our sales presentation assignment. So keeping this one in your brain, could you apply it to the topic that you choose? The next on our list here is criteria satisfaction. So this sets up a criteria that the audience will accept. This is likely done in the introduction right away, so there is a criteria that must be met, and then those main points show us how that criteria is met with that specific business. So the example here, we set up that criteria in the intro, and then we're talking about Verizon, so our central idea might be something like a cell phone carrier must have low rates, a strong signal, and reliable customer service. So those are the criteria we're setting forth in the intro. Then we follow those in that exact order in the main points of our speech, our presentation. First of all, we say it has the lowest rates, and then we say it has the largest network and signal system, and lastly, lots of customer service agents within the U.S. You can also do this by main point, where you set the criteria in the first main point and satisfy it in the second, kind of similar to problem solution there. But the most well-used example of this, for lack of a better word, is this first example here, where we introduce that criteria in the introduction. Then I think we can be a little bit more thorough within our main points. Next one here is comparative advantages. So this puts several alternatives side by side to show what is best. Here we introduce those choices, and then we kind of introduce which one is best, and then in the body of the speech we go through and show how it compares to the other options, say in a market. So A compares to B for main points 1, 2, and 3 with different objectives for each main point, a different comparison for each main point. Your conclusion here, as always, summarizes, and then you want to reiterate the best choice or the solution that you wish people will take in the conclusion there. Here is an example. We talked about gyms, and we made up a fake gym, Tough Guys here. So your intro might be, there are many gyms in Laramie, but you must do a comparison to see that Tough Guys is the best choice. So already introducing what is the best choice right away in the intro, then you go through and explain why, summarize, and reiterate there again in the conclusion. The next one we chatted about, and here we used an example of the Snuggie, the infomercial. This is Monroe's motivated sequence, and like problem solution organization, this one is great for our sales presentations as well. So here we have 5 steps that we have to accomplish. First of all, like always, we have to gain attention right away with our audience. Then we have to establish that there is a need for change. Then in the next point, we satisfy that need for change. We offer that specific solution. Then when they have that solution in their minds, we go to visualization, where we kind of bring it full circle, and we allow the audience to literally visualize how this solution solves those problems and how things will become better in their life, in their business, etc. Then in our conclusion there, we ask them to take action and actually take the solution into account. In the Snuggie commercial, it's to actually go and buy the Snuggie, right? The Snuggie is going to solve that problem. So another example here, just to show you how it's kind of worked out in your outline, we have that attention getter in the intro. We have the need as our first main point, that's the problem. 2, satisfaction, that solution. 3, the visualization and the benefits. Here we want the audience to picture how the solution will work for them. Conclusion, we're taking action, closing the deal. We're asking them to volunteer, asking them for money, their action, etc. Last one here, and again, this one is not in the book, guys, but refutation is a great organizational pattern that you can use to address persuasive messages. So this anticipates the listener's key objections to your proposal and then addresses each of those objections. So especially in politics, we see this often. My opponent says, your next main point would be the truth is, and you would offer several of those. Now you can do this by main point, where maybe your main point says my opponent says something, and then your subpoints refute and tell what you think, or as this example shows, you can do everything that your opponent says in a main point and then offer your side of the story in the second main point. So great option, especially if you're addressing a topic that has a lot of commonly held beliefs that may be wrong or misinterpreted that you want to address. So always keep refutation in mind for business type presentations. Okay guys, we'll switch gears here and start to talk about that sales presentation. We have some great organizations set up with likely either problem solution or Monroe's motivated sequence. First things, when we have sales presentations, we need to be sure that we are establishing client relationships before the presentation. Your presentation needs to be very planned in order to meet the needs of your client. So you must know the client prior so that you can aggregate their needs and plan your presentation around their needs. We always want to put the client's needs first, and to do that we have to know our audience. We have to listen to the clients first in our initial meeting. We also have to listen to the clients throughout the sales presentation. So you're actually going to be talking less as a salesman and listening more. Your client will tell you what they need, and then when you do speak, you're going to be satisfying that need by emphasizing the benefits of a product or whatever you are selling. So our text also says to emphasize benefits and not features. So features are actually those like physical characteristics of a product or a company, something along those lines, where they're actually saying this stereo has a great bass, it has lots of speakers, surround sound that you can put around your living room, right? Those are the actual features, like things that you could read on the box of something, right? Those are the features of something. But the benefits actually are how those things fit into a person's life. So visualizing here how this would be for your family. So if you're talking about that stereo, you could say, when you are watching the Super Bowl here this coming season, you are not going to have to worry about touching your remote. You're going to sit there and you're going to feel like you are at the game because these speakers are so advanced and the technology is so great that they are going to funnel this sound all around you, and you won't have to worry about a thing. You can enjoy the game, right? So you're emphasizing the benefits of those features and not the actual features themselves. And you're going to hear those needs from your customer, and then you are going to satisfy them with those stories and those examples of the features. Then guys, we always need to close strong. Likely that is summarizing, that's asking for action, much like Monroe's motivated sequence there. So sales presentations actually can be super fun, but I think the big thing we need to focus on here is that as a salesman, we think that we should be talking a lot, when really effective salesmen take a step back and make sure that they know and recognize are listening to the audience's needs, their clients' needs, so that they can satisfy. You've all probably been in that situation where a salesperson is trying to sell you something that you are just not interested in, or you you are looking for something else and they continue to talk about another feature that they are trying to sell. So we always want to be that person or that colleague that is very focused on the other's needs and how you can meet those needs. For our specific sales presentations, here's some examples that we've had in the past. So the first is tutoring time. So someone was selling their time to help, especially around finals, tutoring in various subjects. Another person grew up on a ranch, so they were selling steaks homegrown from their ranch in Wyoming. Another person sold a finals packet, so where you had a blue sheet, pens, and pencils all ready to go for you. You had to just come and pick up that package. Desserts, especially again around finals time, we want those snacks to get us through. So whether it be chocolate, cookies, etc. Maybe you wanted to hire a cook for the week or for the day or for an event, so that was another one that you could sell. And a photography session. If you're really great at photography, maybe you would sell a specific session, maybe in the fall or the winter, etc. So a lot of cool ideas here. Think about what you're really good at, what you're interested in, and sell those things. Okay, so we will transition now into training. A lot of us, many of us, have already gone through some type of workplace training, and if you haven't, you definitely will entering our big boy, big girl jobs in the workplace. And then likely at some point in your career, you will have to conduct training yourself. So when planning a training program, first and foremost, we must define the overall training goal. So just like you do in any speech, we have that central idea, that thesis statement, what needs to be accomplished in that speech presentation. Here, it's what needs to be accomplished in the training session. Then based on that goal, you need to develop a schedule and a list of resources that you will need to accomplish that goal. What steps do you need to take to accomplish that goal? And then always, guys, always, we need to involve the audience in our training programs. So we know what it's like to sit through lecture, even sit through listening to the flight attendant on a plane, all those kinds of things where you can sometimes tone out likely, right? But if you are actually doing something physical to apply the concepts, I think that really helps. Even if it's just question and answer, whether you're calling on people, you always want to involve the audience in that process. We never want the audience to just be sitting stagnant, not using their minds, not physically doing something. I remember in sports, especially when our coach would like draw out a play or something, I had to actually go and do that in practice and make sure that I had physically gone around and ran to the various spots and worked through the play myself before I could do it effectively. And I think that's the same for a lot of people in training situations. You actually have to be able to apply the knowledge that you are learning. And we want to apply to all learning styles. So involve the audience in various ways as much as possible. And then as always, guys, we need to organize the presentation. What organizational pattern is going to fit best? You might be training in order to solve a problem, so you might use problem solution. You might need to address 3 different aspects of a training in a specific instance, so you use topical so that you can address maybe workplace attire for a new person. So you're going to do that as the first part of the training. Then you're going to talk about sales systems, like point of sale systems, and that's going to be the second part of your training topically. And last, you might talk about corporate communication within this large company, and that might be your third point. So if you have those larger areas to cover, topical might fit best. Another couple notes here on training. When you're delivering the training, you need to link the topic to the audience. So you want them to know exactly how this applies to them in their job, in their place in the company, in the workplace, etc. And you want to always start with the overall picture. So set the tone for the training, why that information is important to the company, linking it back to the audience and their specific role there. Emphasis on organization. The audience wants to know what is going to come in the presentation. So we remember, tell them what we're going to tell them, then we tell them, and then we remind them what we told them. We tell them what we told them. So emphasis on organization. Give the audience a roadmap of what's to come based on that organizational pattern that you have planned. actually delivering the training here, guys, we want to cover only necessary information. So training all the time, most of the time at least, is kind of a drag. So we want to make sure, again, that we are involving the audience, that we are covering and hitting on what absolutely needs to be known from that audience. We also want to avoid jargon, or if we're going to use jargon, be sure that we describe and position those terms so that the audience, the layman, understands. And to do that, and to cover this information and to connect to the audience, we always want to link the familiar to the unfamiliar. So using those analogies that people are familiar with, using descriptions people are familiar with to position that new information that they are receiving and allow them to make that personal connection there. Alright guys, lastly here we'll talk about group presentations. There's two main approaches that we can take going into group presentations. The first of which is organizing by topic. So you might have a topic that you can break down into specific sections, and maybe those sections of the topic have an expert or spokesperson that is able to discuss the topic in more depth and answer more questions. So for example, maybe you are going to a city council meeting where they're discussing your town's homecoming parade, and the fire chief has to be present in case there are any issues, so he might speak on how the fire department will be available and how they'll be able to handle those problems. Then he might pass the torch to the chief of police, and they're going to talk about how they're going to block off the streets and maintain traffic during the parade. And then they might divert to the school's principal so that they can talk about how the parade will flow and how they hope to make it a success, etc. So there we can see that we're talking about one holistic topic, the homecoming parade, but there's several segments that go into making that homecoming parade a success, and you want to talk to those head people in each instance. This also applies to companies. If you're going to be addressing each different department, you might have a spokesperson from each department rather than just, say, the vice president of the company talking holistically. We can also organize by task here, and our text says sometimes the material to be covered in a presentation does not fall neatly into separate topic areas. In this case, it may make sense to assign speakers separate roles within the discussion of a topic. So one person might be the MC, where maybe they do the introduction and the conclusion of the presentation. Maybe they help to transition between various speakers, and maybe one person describes a problem within the group, and then the next person offers that solution to the problem and helps to talk through that, and they're the ones that have done the research on the logistics of the solution, etc. Also guys, when I talked about the MC, and sometimes each speaker will transition between themselves, it just kind of depends on how you set things up, but you always want to have those clear transitions between one another. So the MC might say something like, "Thank you, John, for discussing the problem. Now we'll transition here to Karen, and Karen is going to discuss the solution." If the speakers themselves do it, John might say, "All right, so that is the problem as a whole. Now I'm going to pass it on to Karen to talk about the solution." And she would say, "Thanks, John. Let's talk about the first part of the solution." So there you can see that we're always acknowledging the other person, acknowledging what they talked about, and transitioning to the next piece so that the audience can clearly follow the organization of the information presented. Other things to note here for planning introductions and the conclusion. So the introduction, you need to plan for the presentation itself. So what is the content for that presentation? And then for each of the speakers, who is going to say what? Is one person going to talk holistically for the intro, etc. And we want to do the same thing there for the conclusion. How are we going to address the conclusion? Who is going to say what? What is the content there? Remember, our audience remembers what is said first and last, so the intro and the conclusion need to be very polished. Planning transitions, I just talked about this a little bit. Transitions are important. We need to pass the baton very effectively and smoothly. And as I talked about there, it can be handled by the spokesperson or handled by each individual speaker as they pass the mic to the next person. Couple more notes here on group presentations. We want to plan for extensive rehearsal. So getting those transitions correct and making sure that everything flows well between various speakers that have each practiced individually. So before you go into these situations, each person should have their role pretty well ironed out and have practiced that themselves. And then you want to put it together to make sure that those transitions are smooth. Consider your setup. What kind of technology will you have? What room will you be in? How big will your audience be? Where do you want people to stand? So maybe you want people all lined up. Maybe you want certain people on either side of a projection screen. Maybe you want the speaker at that time to step forward and then transition and step back while the other person steps forward. All of that should be very planned out prior to that formal presentation. Other notes here, delivering the group presentation, we want to listen attentively when not presenting. It's easy to kind of tone out when it's not your place, but you never want to be caught standing. You always want to be able to offer support if your other group member needs help, and always be ready to take the baton when it is passed to you. Another thing here, we want to remember to always speak to the audience. So we will likely have visual aids, there's other people around you. Make sure that your focus is on your audience, not on the screen behind you, not on the people standing next to you, not on the technology that you are using, on the audience. Another thing to keep in mind, guys, as you are preparing for group presentations is the dress of each member of your group. So maybe to visibly show the cohesiveness of your group, you want to all dress in a similar color, or you want to set a color scheme for everybody to follow. And then we also always want to be sure that we have discussed the level of formality that we are going to dress to. So it would be a little bit odd if maybe one person in your group was wearing a formal suit and the next person standing next to him in the group was wearing nice jeans and a polo, right? So color schemes can be very effective, and then also making sure that everybody is dressed to a similar level going into the presentation is always helpful. Alright guys, so that is what I have for you for Chapter 12, knowing that there is a lot of other great information provided in our Chapter 12 reading, so do go to that and read all of that thoroughly. But this is the things that I really wanted to touch on, moving into our sales presentations, our career research presentations, reviewing that organization, and talking about the best way to work through those various presentations, including group, sales, and trainings. So if you have any questions on content covered in this chapter, please let me know. Happy to help. Thanks.